Well, my parents were married in 1924, and then Albert and Marion were born, and they moved into a little house in Philadelphia, right near Overbrook, near City Line. I know that my parents wanted to move out to the suburban area, and then they built the house in Wynwood at 1401 Medford Road. And that was part of the Clothier estate at that time, which was broken up and sold to developers and builders. And most of the houses were very different, the original houses, because they were all built by individual owners or builders, which makes it a very special neighborhood of not huge houses, but very comfortable family houses. And close to the city and also part of the suburbs. And at the same time, Suburban Square was built, the first suburban shopping center in the country. So they were really in a very special area, being in Wynwood, which was right next to Ardmore. And that was where the new shopping center was. Okay, I was born in 1930, year after the Great Depression started, and I was born in the house that my father had designed and built. And my older brother, Danny, who was only 14 months older than I, was like my twin brother. We did everything together from the time we were little toddlers. And when he went to kindergarten, I cried all day because he was gone and I couldn't play with him. And he cried at school in kindergarten because I wasn't there. So my mother got very upset, and she went to the principal and asked if I could please come to school with Danny so that we wouldn't be crying for each other. So the principal let me go. They wouldn't do that today, but I went in a year earlier than most kids would. But I was there to be with Danny, and we went all through school together. We had a wonderful time. We were very fortunate to have each other all the time we were there. So that was how I started out. The first thing I really remember was that as a little girl, I liked to play with my brother Danny. I really didn't like to do girl things. And Marion loved dolls. And every night before we went to bed, she had this lineup of dolls. She'd kiss them all goodnight and dress them. I thought she was the silliest thing in the whole world. To me, dolls were just ridiculous. But anyway, I was lucky to have Danny, and I could play and do more fun things. But that I remember in our bedroom every night, where Marion would go through her routine. But that I do remember early on. I also remember loving to follow the gardener around. And he didn't speak very much English. He was from Italy, but he sure knew how to grow things. And I learned more from him as a little child, just following him around. I loved watching what he did. So he started me on my love of gardening and plants. I can put it back to Gabriel. So I do remember that early on. I was very little. And I do remember walking to school with Danny and following him and climbing trees. We had lots of trees in the neighborhood. So that was really my beginning as a child. Penguin Elementary School. It was a wonderful little suburban school, and very different from my mother sending us off to school there, because she had gone to the convent school with nuns all her life. And this was very different, having us in a public school with boys and girls. And actually, I think she loved it. Such a part of our life at school, and we loved it there. I was very lucky. I had a wonderful art teacher and a wonderful music teacher. They're the ones I really remember the most. I was a little chubby girl when I was little, and people would make fun of me because I was so chubby. And when I was in 6th grade, I was given the solo part in our music program, the show that we put on, whatever it was called. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, I was given the lead solo, and all my classmates made fun of me because I got to play the princess and I was very chubby. And that was very funny to them. It wasn't to me. I was I was very hurt by it, but I still remember it was a big thing in my little life then. And I loved singing. I loved being part of the whole thing. And music teacher was so nice to me, so it was a happy time for me. My father, when he built that beautiful tower with the round steps, he just was in awe of it himself. And actually, when the Second World War started, he thought up this idea that if we had to protect ourselves from the Nazis, we could be at the top of the tower steps, and he would have a great big cauldron of hot lead, and we'd let them in the front door, and then we'd all start screaming, and he would pretend he was pouring the hot lead down through the tower steps right down to the center hall to kill the Nazi soldiers. And that was, oh, we played it a lot because he wanted to be prepared to fight the Nazis. So then we did move out back in 1945, the end of the war. But right beforehand, he was very serious about it. But he designed this beautiful hallway. And actually, it was very dangerous. I would be scared to death to have children there. But I guess we were all careful. There wasn't a wide banister to slide down. It was just a wrought iron banister. So you really had to hold on to go up and down the steps. And maybe that's why I don't remember anybody getting hurt. They had to hold on anyway. I do remember the neighborhood children loving to come into our hallway and go up and look at all the nude statues that my father had placed in the niches as you went up through the steps. And they weren't interested in the stairs, they were only interested in the statues. But that made our house kind of special. Actually, Josie, Leonid, and Diane shared a room on the 3rd floor. And Mary, our housekeeper, was up there with them. And so they were sort of in their own little world, but they fought all the time. I have to say that for me, being the sister between my older sister Marion and my younger sister Josie, who were both, each one of them, very strong personalities. So I became the little yes girl, and I followed my brother Danny at every opportunity I was out of there. And actually, because the 3 girls fought all the time, they were not much fun to be around. So I didn't hang out with them too much. I really didn't. I spent my time with Danny and the boys anytime I could. I really wasn't around much. The biggest thing that really happened for me as a child was when my sister Josie was burned. She was only 2.5, I was 3.5, 4. And from then on, it was really a whole world of getting Josie better. She was burned when we lived in the house in Medford Road. I think Mary was in the kitchen, and my mother was upstairs on the 3rd floor with baby Leonid, and she was carrying her around. She needed to get, I think, toilet tissue for the bathroom up on the 3rd floor or whatever it was. So she walked down with Leonid, and Josephine was with her, following her, a little toddler, and they came down into the kitchen. Mary was there. Mary must have seen Mother walking out with baby Leonid and Josie and into the garage, and then Mother did get what she needed, and then she walked out with Leonid and back upstairs, and Josie went and gotten herself into the car, which was into the garage. Remembered where the matches were in the glove department. She closed the door and she lit a match. She knew she was doing something she shouldn't be doing. And she had a smock dress with a great big bow on it, and somehow she lit the match and the bow caught on fire and she caught on fire, and she was screaming and screaming, Mary. But Mary hadn't noticed her going by in the kitchen when Mother left. So neither one, all of a sudden, I guess they heard the screaming and they ran, and she was locked in the car. They had to break down the door of the car to get to her, which they did, and the ambulance came and they carried a little black crisp right up to Bryn Mawr Hospital. It was a very horrible thing. terrible accident, and I think she was in the hospital for at least 3 or 4 months. And they worked very hard on her. For many years, we had a doctor that came every day. Josie would be in the living room waiting, and the doctor would work on her. Quite an accomplishment that she lived through it and that they were able to do what they did for her. Amazing that my parents were able to get the right medical work for her because they were able to afford it. And with no insurance like today, and Dad trying to get good jobs, and the new house, it was a hard time for them. But we all lived through it. The hardest part of it was Josie getting better. When Marion did get married, and we were living in Mill Creek Road at that point, Josie and I were in the wedding party, and one of Joe Muldoon's relatives from Switzerland had moved to this country after the war, and he was a German plastic surgeon. And when he saw Josie at the wedding, he asked about her, and he called my parents aside, and he introduced himself and said he was a surgeon from Germany and he would like to be able to help them with Josie and the scars that she had from her accident. And of course they were thrilled. So for at least, I think, 5 years, Josie was in and out of the hospital, being so brave, getting all these operations. And Dr. Hans May was the miracle man who did so much for her.
Where did that?
And that was a very special time. He was a happy guy. He was always he was very active and very happy. He loved to sing, and he loved to dance, and he loved his job, and he was just a very outgoing person. And as a little child, I just loved following him around. I thought he was pretty special. And again, he lived a very busy life too. And I think I probably spent more time with Danny and the gardener than I did with my father. But I was around him a lot, as much as I could be. And I remember when I was real little, our life revolved around Josie getting better. So, and Dad was very concerned about that. He was very into making sure things were right. So I do remember thinking he was a great father, you know, as a little kid, because of what he did. When we were little, Dad was very proud of us, and he loved taking pictures of us all the time, which we would get tired of his. And then he had a dark room in the basement, and he would reproduce all these pictures himself. Suzanne takes after him with her love of photography. He loved it, but he'd line us up in front of the fireplace. We always called it the lineup. After church on Sunday, when we were in our best clothes, he would line us up and take the picture of us, and we had to line up by our age so he could take pictures. And so he did a lot of that. And whenever I had a new dress for a formal, he'd make me walk down the steps and then pose at the bottom of the steps, and he'd take my picture in the new dress. So he was very into that part of it, making you think you were really pretty hot stuff. He really did build us up. He was always telling us how great we were. So I have to say we were lucky to have him as a father that made us feel so special. We really were. Even though we were a great big family, he was terrific. Oh, yes. Well, Cindy and Sandy well, they were the Schobel sisters, and they lived down the street. I played with them when I wasn't playing with Danny and the boys. And the girls loved being up at our house with all the commotion and excitement that went on. Their house wasn't really an awful lot of fun, so they used to like to come to our house and be part of the mob scene. So we saw a lot of them. We walked everywhere. And my sister Marion and I used to go to the dentist in Philadelphia. We'd walk to the Wynwood Railroad station by ourselves, get on the train, go into Philadelphia to the dentist, come out. And in those days, nobody worried about it. Nobody locked doors, worried about their children. I think after the Depression, they were just worried about paying the bills. because it was talked about all the time. We knew we were in the Depression, and we were very lucky to live in such a wonderful place. We could walk up, go to the movies in Suburban Square, and Ardmore had a movie theater. We didn't walk much to stores or shops or any of that, but we did go to the movies. And we had on the Clothier estate, they had a wonderful pond. In the winter, we were able to skate there. And we could just walk to that on our own. We did an awful lot of things on our own as children that the children today can't do because their parents are concerned about their safety. It was a very open, different world then. Actually, I met my best friend in 4th grade when we lived on Medford Row, and that was Doris Ann Cherksey. And we stayed best friends all through school. And in junior high, we did many things together. We used to love to take the train and go into Philadelphia and go to the Chinese restaurant. And we started going to the orchestra together, and we could only afford to sit up in the penny circle all the way up in the top. But we were in junior high, so we could do these things. And we'd go in town and do all these things together. So a lot of that was my doing things with her more than my sisters, because Doris Ann and I liked the same things. And so we shared our music and art. We loved to go to all the art things in Philadelphia. So I really did more with her and Marion than I did with Josie, Leonid, and Diane.